All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep on planetary defense today, which I have to admit is both fascinating and a little bit scary.
Yeah, I hear you there.
You sent me these articles about this asteroid they discovered, 2024 YR4, and reading about an impact maybe in 2032.
Wow.
It definitely got my attention.
Yeah, I
Like,
will.
it's a real chance it could hit Earth.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's small, but still, it feels like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It really does have that kind of feel to it, doesn't it? But it's real-world science, like we need to take it seriously, but it's also important not to get too carried away by, all the hype. We're here to break down the facts, understand the science behind it all, and really look at what people are doing to address this threat.
Exactly. So let's do that. Let's unpack this, starting with the asteroid itself, 2024 YR4. It's been all over the news lately because they upped its threat level, and that's got the scientists paying a lot more attention. What insights can you offer on all this?
Yeah, well, that increased threat level is exactly why everyone's talking about 2024 YR4. It was first spotted by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System.
Catchy name.
Right, down in Chile. And what's really interesting is that it's now considered a level 3 on the Torino Impact Hazard Scale.
Okay, so the Torino scale, I remember seeing that in one of the articles, but honestly, I didn't really get it. Can you kind of explain what a level 3 means for us?
So think of it like an early warning system. The Torino scale, it's how scientists communicate the risk of an asteroid hitting Earth. And they use a scale from 0 to 10, 0, meaning no chance of a collision, and 10. Well, let's just say that'd be really bad for everyone. Level 3, which is where 2024 YR4 sits, means it needs our attention. It means there's a chance of impact, but the odds are still looking pretty good for us.
So no need to panic just yet then?
Not at all. The chance of 2024 YR4 hitting us is only about 2.3%. So that means there's a 97.7% chance it'll miss us completely.
Okay, that's good to hear. But still, I can't help but think December 22nd, 2032 is going to be a little nerve-wracking knowing this thing is out there.
Yeah, I can see that. It's definitely a date to mark on your calendar. But here's the thing. These impact probabilities, they're not set in stone. As we learn more and get a better handle on 2024 YR4's trajectory, these probabilities can change, and they often do. In fact, there have been plenty of times where asteroids that seemed like a threat turned out to be nothing at all. So it's very possible that the situation with 2024 YR4 could look very different in a few years.
Fingers crossed for that trajectory change then. But let's just say for a minute that it does stay on course. Where are we talking about impact-wise? I remember the articles mentioned some pretty diverse locations.
Yeah, that's a pretty big impact zone. Based on what we know right now, possible impact sites could be anywhere from the eastern Pacific Ocean to northern South America, even parts of Africa, the Arabian Sea, and South Asia.
Wow, that really puts it into perspective, doesn't it? You mentioned you had family and location mentioned in transcripts, right? They'd be
Yeah.
right in the potential impact zone. And speaking of global efforts, one of the articles that really stood out to me was about China setting up their own planetary defense team. What do you think about that? Seems like a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal. China joining the planetary defense game is significant. It shows they're serious about space and that they get how important it is to protect our planet from threats like this.
And their team sounds amazing. It's not just astronomers and physicists, right? I read something about a much broader approach.
Yeah, you're right. They've got experts from all sorts of fields, everything from tracking asteroids and simulating impacts to developing something called deflection technologies. It's
Yeah.
clear they're really putting resources into this.
Deflection technologies. That sounds like something right out of a movie. Break it down
Okay.
for us. What does deflecting an asteroid actually involve?
It may sound like science fiction, but it's a real area of research. Basically, deflection technologies are ways to gently nudge an asteroid off course so it doesn't hit Earth. One promising method is the kinetic impactor. It's like a spacecraft designed to crash into the asteroid at high speed to slightly change its path.
So kind of like a cosmic billiards shot.
Exactly. And the cool thing is if you can hit the asteroid early enough, even a tiny nudge can make a big difference in its trajectory.
Wow. It's mind-blowing to think we might actually have the technology to deflect an asteroid. But it also makes you wonder, could this kind of technology be used for less peaceful purposes too? And how does this all play into international collaboration or maybe even competition in space when it comes to planetary defense?
Those are some really big questions. China being so proactive is definitely going to shake things up on a global level.
So let's get into that. Then the next article we've got takes a closer look at China's specific defense plans. It sounds like they're already doing quite a bit.
China has been building up their planetary defense capabilities for years now. They've got a whole network of systems on the ground and in space monitoring the skies for potential threats.
It sounds like they're not just watching, though. They're taking real steps to prepare for a potential deflection mission.
Absolutely. In fact, they recently made the decision to reschedule their asteroid deflection mission, pushing it back to 2027.
Rescheduled. That's interesting. What happened there?
Well, it seems like they've shifted their focus to a different asteroid. This one's called 2015 XF2612. Their original plan was to launch in 2025, but this delay gives them more time to fine-tune their tracking and observation technology.
And what's the goal with this new target?
This mission is pretty ambitious. They want to observe the asteroid up close and then hit it with a kinetic impactor, all with one launch. It's a bold move that would really show off their expertise in space exploration and planetary defense.
That's impressive. They're really all in on this. It seems like they're taking the potential threat very seriously. But even with all these precautions, it's hard not to think about the what-ifs. What if 2024 YR4 does hit Earth? What kind of impact scenarios are scientists looking at?
That's the question, isn't it? And even though the chances of an impact are small, it's important to understand what could happen. Let's explore some of those scenarios.
Okay, let's dive into those what-if scenarios then.
Okay, so first let's talk about ocean impacts.
Yeah.
A lot of people just assume that an asteroid hitting the ocean would create huge tsunamis, wiping out coastlines all over the world. But new research is showing that it might not be as bad as we thought.
Really? That's surprising. Why is that?
Well, it turns out a lot of the energy from an ocean impact could actually be absorbed by the atmosphere and the top layers of the ocean. That would reduce the power of any tsunamis. Of course, the exact effects would depend on things like the asteroid size, speed, and angle.
Yeah.
But the good news is that a global tsunami might be less likely than we used to think.
That's a relief. But what about if it hits land? Those are the images that come to mind, right? When you think about an asteroid strike.
Yeah, that's what we usually see in the movies. A land impact would be a whole different story. Depending on its size, 2024 YR4 could create a crater miles wide. The energy release could be like hundreds or even thousands of Hiroshima bombs. It would be devastating.
That's a scary thought. One of the articles also talked about another possibility, an atmospheric explosion like the one in Tunguska. Can you tell us more about that?
Right, so the Tunguska event back in 1908, that was when a small asteroid or comet exploded in the atmosphere over Siberia. It flattened trees for hundreds of square miles. Even without hitting the ground directly, an atmospheric explosion from 2024 YR4 could create powerful shock waves and intense heat, causing a lot of damage.
It's incredible how much power is involved. And it's not just the initial impact we have to worry about, right? There could be long-term environmental and climate effects, too.
Right. You got it. A medium-sized asteroid strike could have a major impact on our planet. The dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere could block out sunlight, leading to global cooling and less rain. That could disrupt agriculture and ecosystems all over the world. And an ocean impact could damage the ozone layer, which protects us from the sun's harmful UV radiation.
So the effects could last for years or even decades after the impact.
Exactly. But there's a kind of strange twist to all this. While ecosystems on land would definitely suffer, some research suggests that ocean ecosystems might actually benefit from an asteroid impact.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the impact could bring in nutrients and change ocean currents, creating new opportunities for marine life.
That is surprising. It's fascinating how even in a potential disaster, some life forms might actually thrive. It really makes you think about how resilient nature is and how destruction and creation are often connected in ways we don't expect.
It's a good reminder that these events can have complex and unpredictable consequences.
Well, this has been a really interesting and sometimes kind of scary look into the world of planetary defense. Before we wrap up for today, let's take a minute to think about what we've learned so far.
Yeah, it really feels like we've wandered into some sci-fi thriller today. But let's take a step back for a second and kind of look at the big picture of 2024 YR4 and planetary defense.
Sounds good. It's easy to get lost in all the little details, but keeping that bigger context in mind is important.
Exactly. So the main thing is that while we should be keeping an eye on this asteroid, it doesn't sound like it's time to freak out just yet. I mean, the chances of it actually hitting are still pretty low, right?
That's right. And like we said before, that trajectory and those impact probabilities could totally change as scientists learn more. It's possible that with more observations, they'll find that 2024 YR4 is no longer a threat, right? We're still early in the game with this one, so things could look totally different down the road. But what about planetary defense in general? China's getting involved seems like a huge shift. They're really putting a lot of resources into this monitoring research and even those deflection technologies.
Yeah, their efforts are definitely something to watch. It'll be interesting to see how having them in the mix changes things for international collaboration and maybe even competition in space.
Speaking of China's efforts, let's recap what they're already doing. They have a pretty impressive network of monitoring systems on the ground and in space, right?
Mm.
Always scanning for potential threats.
They've made a lot of progress with their monitoring capabilities,
Yeah.
and they're not stopping there. They're developing and testing those deflection technologies, and their mission to 2015 XF 2612, that's going to be a big test for them.
Right. That mission's set for 2027, and it's a pretty ambitious one. They want to get up close, observe the asteroid, and then actually hit it with a kinetic impactor all in one go. It really shows how dedicated they are to advancing this technology.
It's a bold move for sure, one that could really push things forward for planetary defense as a whole.
Okay, so we've talked about the facts and where things stand right now. But we also went into those what-if scenarios, with potential consequences if 2024 YR4 does hit Earth. That was a little unsettling, but I think it's important to talk about.
Definitely. It's crucial to understand what could happen even if the odds are in our favor. And like we discussed, the consequences would be very different depending on what kind of impact we're talking about. For example, an ocean impact might not be as catastrophic as people think. Thanks to some new research, we know that the atmosphere and upper ocean layers could absorb a lot of the energy.
Right, that was a surprising finding. But if it hit land, that would be a totally different story, right? We could be talking about widespread devastation. I mean, the energy release could be like hundreds, maybe even thousands of Hiroshima bombs. It's hard to even imagine.
It's pretty sobering. And then there's the long-term effects on the environment and climate. The dust and debris could cause global cooling, less rain and disruption to ecosystems all over the planet. They could even lead to food shortages. And an ocean impact could damage the ozone layer, which protects us from the sun's radiation.
It just shows how one impact could have ripple effects across the entire planet.
Absolutely. Even a single impact could trigger a chain reaction with
That's it.
consequences that affect everything.
But we also talked about that interesting paradox, right? A medium-sized asteroid impact would be devastating for a lot of ecosystems, but some marine environments could actually benefit.
Yeah, that's right. The impact could bring in nutrients and change ocean currents, which could create new opportunities for certain species. It just goes to show that even in the face of disaster, nature can adapt and evolve.
It really highlights how complex and unpredictable these events can be.
For sure. And it emphasizes the need for a multifaceted approach to planetary defense.
Yeah.
We have to think about the immediate impact, but also those long-term and often unexpected consequences.
So where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway from everything we've learned about 2024 YR4 and planetary defense?
I think the main takeaway is that we're moving into a new era of space awareness and responsibility. The threat of asteroid impacts, while not an immediate crisis, is a real danger that we need to be proactive about. It's not just about deflecting one asteroid. It's about developing a whole system for planetary defense. That includes monitoring and deflection technologies, but also public education and preparedness.
That's a really important point. It's not just about the science and technology. It's about everyone understanding and being a part of this.
Exactly. We need to make sure people understand the risks, know what to do in an emergency, and feel like they can be part of the conversation about how we respond to this challenge as a global community.
It's a call to action for scientists, governments, international organizations, and everyday people to work together to protect our planet and make sure humanity has a future.
Couldn't agree more. We need to be ready for anything from close calls that we just need to monitor carefully to potential impact scenarios where we need to take action.
And we need to do this while understanding both the risks and the opportunities. We need to develop effective strategies for planetary defense, but also balance other priorities and make sure our efforts benefit everyone on Earth.
Well said. It's about finding a way forward that makes sense scientifically and ethically.
So as we wrap up our discussion about 2024 YR4, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something for them to think about as they explore these complex issues.
I think the most important thing to remember is that we're not helpless. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the will to protect our planet. What's really cool is that this isn't just about survival. It's about stepping up as caretakers of Earth and taking responsibility for the future of our species. That's a powerful idea, and I hope it inspires people to keep learning and taking action.
That's a great point. And it emphasizes how important it is to keep researching and developing in this field. We need to keep pushing the boundaries, not just to protect ourselves from threats, but also to understand our place in the universe.
Absolutely. Knowledge and new technologies are going to be key to our success.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. We've covered a lot of ground, from the specifics of 2024 YR4 and China's plans to those bigger questions of international collaboration, ethical considerations, and the future of humanity. It's a lot to take in, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
I agree. The more we understand about these challenges, the better prepared we'll be to face them.
So before we wrap up, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier about public education and preparedness. What does that look like in real life? What can everyday people do to get involved and make a difference?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah,
It can feel kind of overwhelming, when we're talking about these huge cosmic threats like asteroids. It's hard to know where to even start as an individual.
I get that. But honestly, public engagement is super important when it comes to planetary defense. It's not just about scientists and governments, it's about all of us realizing that we have a role to play in facing this challenge.
So what does that look like practically? I mean, what can people actually do? Well, just staying informed is a big first step. Our listeners are already doing that by tuning in and really diving deep into these topics, reading articles, following reliable sources online, even having conversations like this one. It all helps to raise awareness.
That makes sense. The more people understand the risks and the potential solutions, the better equipped we are as a society to make good decisions.
Right? And knowledge really is power.
Mm.
It can help us overcome fear and actually inspire action. Another important thing is supporting organizations and initiatives that are focused on planetary defense.
So you mean like donating to groups or volunteering?
Exactly. There are tons of nonprofits, research institutions, even citizen science projects out there that are dedicated to things like tracking asteroids, developing ways to deflect them, and advocating for policies that prioritize planetary defense. Even small contributions can make a real difference.
That's good to know. I'll definitely be checking some of those out. But what about personal preparedness? Is it time to start building those backyard bunkers?
That's a question I hear a lot, and I understand why people ask it. But the good news is you probably don't need a bunker. The most important thing is to have a plan. Just like we prepare for earthquakes or other natural disasters, having an emergency plan for a potential asteroid impact can really help reduce anxiety and increase our chances of staying safe.
So what would that kind of plan look like?
It would involve things like figuring out safe places in your home or community, having a way to communicate with your family and friends, and stocking up on some essential supplies like food, water, and first aid stuff. It's also a good idea to learn about the warning systems and evacuation procedures that would be in place if there was a real threat.
So it's basically the same kind of preparedness you do for any major emergency.
Exactly. A lot of the same principles apply. Be informed, have a plan, and be ready to act if you need to. But remember, the odds of a major impact are still pretty low. It's important to keep things in perspective and not let fear take over your life.
That's a good reminder. It's about finding that balance between being prepared and living your life without constantly worrying.
Right? It's about incorporating this awareness into your life in a healthy way. And who knows, maybe all this focus on planetary defense will lead to more people getting interested in space exploration and science education.
That would be amazing. Imagine a future where we all see planetary defense as a shared responsibility, something that brings us together as a global community and drives scientific progress.
That's definitely a future worth working towards. And it starts with conversations like this one, with individuals like you taking the time to learn, get involved, and share this knowledge with others.
Well, this has been a really insightful and thought-provoking deep dive into planetary defense. We've covered so much, from the specifics of 2024 YR4 and China's plans to these bigger questions about international collaboration, public preparedness, and the future of humanity. It's a complex and constantly changing field, but one that definitely deserves our attention and collective effort.
Couldn't agree more. It's a challenge that brings out the best in us, our creativity, our resilience, and our ability to work together.
So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, gained a deeper appreciation for the wonders and challenges of space, and maybe even feel inspired to get involved.
Remember, we're all in this together.
And as we continue to explore the universe and push the boundaries of human knowledge, let's do it responsibly with a commitment to protecting our planet for generations to come. Keep looking up, stay curious, and never stop exploring.
Until next time.